Mr. Chairman and members of your subcommittee. For most nations, when you boil it down, three things matter: their economic, their social and their cultural health. My motivation to come to this place over 40 years ago was primarily to address and advance New Zealand's economic health. And the course correction that I spearheaded culminated in the passage of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, a set of principles designed to correct the conduct of fiscal policy that had become wayward and wrong. You heard of the slogan, "It's the economy, stupid." That was the mantra that governments and their challengers seek to observe if they want electoral success. Well, there's now a new rival on the block. It's the culture, stupid. There is a new imperative in New Zealand on the cultural front, the necessity to correct or to address and correct treaty overreach that has increasingly and evidently become wayward and wrong. It is a proper use of statutory power to spell out in law the set of principles that are designed to govern the conduct of treaty policy. That, in essence, is why I support this bill, both as to its timing and its text. As I say in my written submission, this is a bill of consequence whose time has come. So to the treaty itself and the meaning of the principles at the treaty, that's at the heart of the matter. The treaty is cast in stone, that's not disputed. However, the concept of the principles of the treaty is a relatively modern matter. The most significant attempt hitherto to define the principles of the treaty was made not by Parliament, but by the courts. The landmark ruling by Cook J in the 1987 Lands case advanced 5 propositions that were ruled to be crucial in defining the principles of the treaty. And I want in my oral submission to examine those 5 and see the impact that they have had on the evolution of treaty policy and conduct in recent times. So come to the first principle. Cook J said the treaty signified a partnership. Nowhere in the treaty was the word partnership used, let alone defined. Partnership was an invention of the courts, which in recent times has become a platform for policy that is driven by separatism and for policy that trashes democratic norms. And I refer to the ill-fated establishment of the Maori Health Authority as an exercise in separatism, now unlamented and gone. And in terms of the trashing of democratic norms, I refer to the dictate of co-governance that was roundly repudiated by the electorate in their wish to ditch the Three Waters reforms. The second principle enunciated by the court was active protection of Maori interests. The multiple initiatives to protect and promote Maori interests have more recently been taken to absurd lengths. I refer to the scandalous use of taxpayer money to the tune of $4 million to fund the singing of whale songs to deceased kauri trees. Or I could reference the Championship of Matarangi Māori, which now passes as having the scientific equivalence of, say, CRISPR gene editing technology, or the equivalence of the novel use of RNA to manufacture in record time a COVID vaccine. What Matarangi Māori would make of the rapid evolution of AI, I know not, or perhaps we should ask DeepSeek that question. The third principle was informed decision-making. Let's take one of the big challenges of our age, combating climate change. The government and the Climate Change Commission have consulted widely before landing on targets and carbon trading mechanisms. The Climate Change Commission particularly has bent over backwards to understand and reflect treaty principles in their advice. But no, in the Smith versus Fonterra case, Mr. Smith, he's the chap that chopped down the One Tree on One Tree Hill, has taken Fonterra and others to court, contending that Te Kanga and his mana requires their actions, that is the government's actions, to be held to a higher standard, that is Fonterra and other corporate entities, that their actions have to be held to a higher standard than that required by government policy. And significantly, the Supreme Court has indulged that view and allowed Smith 3 courses of action to proceed, citing in performance the importance of Te Kanga. Dangerously, this and another prominent case involving the late Peter Ellis, he who had no Maori ancestry, seek to elevate Te Kanga as a new third branch of jurisprudence alongside statute and common law. The fourth principle was the Crown should remedy past grievances. The treaty settlement process began in earnest during my time in Parliament and continues apace. I had some personal involvement in the shaping of the Pan-Maori fishery settlement, and I, for my sins, created the fiscal envelope to start the compensation process. So there's no black mark on that score. The fifth and most important of Cook's declarations was the right to govern. This finding was a resounding declaration by Cook that a duly elected government must be free to govern. I quote, "To try to shackle the government unreasonably would itself be inconsistent with those principles." And add to that the least quoted judgment of Gordon Bison. In accordance with the principles of the treaty, the Crown should provide laws and make related decisions for the community as a whole, having regard to the economic and other needs of the day. I say hear to that. But no, Hei Puapua advances in full throat the concept of separate governance, mana mutahaki, and its sponsor, Willie Jackson, regarded it in the end as electorally toxic and withdrew that proposition under pressure from his own political party. Or the courts in the recent customary titles case refused to give effect to the explicit and unambiguous use of language by Parliament. A rushed Supreme Court decision in damage limitation mode partially reversed that decision in the face of a bill introduced into this Parliament designed to correct the overreach and the misinterpretation. So let me finish by tackling a common refrain, and I've heard it this morning, of those who oppose the bill. They say, The mere fact of the introduction of this bill has been represented as an outrage, and that somehow it involves a derogation or rejection of the treaty. The opponents are essentially saying, how dare Parliament legislate a set of treaty principles? But wait a minute, apparently it's okay for the courts to do this, but not the Parliament. What nonsense. Parliament is the supreme legislative authority. The courts cannot and should not legislate from the bench. But my charge is that Parliament has been missing in action as the whole treaty industry overreach has evolved and gathered steam. This bill restores to Parliament to its rightful place and should give the electorate some comfort that the treaty overreach by the courts, the Waitangi Tribunal and officialdom will not continue unchecked. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. We'll take some questions. The first one's from Tracy McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ruth. You said that partnership was an invention of the courts, presumably as a means by which to interpret the treaty. So how would you rate Parliament's execution of the treaty, Te Tiriti, up until the last 50 years where the courts took that upon themselves to provide those principles?
In my submission, I say that the evolution of the principles of the treaty has happened by accident rather than by design. In other words, Parliament has stayed out of that fight. It has made references in statutes to have regard to the principles of the treaty, but has never been game to define them. The courts have filled that vacuum. I say Parliament must now step up.
If I could just clarify, my question was specifically, how do you think that Parliament had done, how do you rate their efforts prior to that happening on honouring the treaty, on executing the treaty?
Well, that is another kettle of fish. This is a story about the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi. Parliament has had fitful efforts to involve itself. Primarily, it's been left to governments by way of treaty settlements, which Parliament has then ratified. But my point is what Parliament has done has effectively abandoned the definition of the principles of the treaty and let it be determined by unaccountable authorities, the courts, the Waitangi Tribunal and officialdom.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Tracy, for the questions. That's the time we have this morning. Can I just acknowledge your presence and your submission?
I was not expecting us to be eating our vegetables literally the moment we get in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to describe Ruth Richardson's submission. It says a hell of a lot of probably how she has her values and her principles, and it opens up a lot of things there, because, I mean, we didn't get this sort of submission from Jenny Shipley. We did not get this sort of submission from Marilyn Waring, but by how Ruth Richardson is like a modern-day ACT supporter.
Yes. 100%. Yeah, I think her politics spoke pretty strongly for themselves. It's interesting to see people from the past come out of the woodwork, right? And as you say, there's been people who have come out in different sides, and I think that it's yeah. I mean, it's not a surprise to see Ruth Richardson saying what she's saying, but I do think there are. What's playing out is very obvious. Is there is this group of people who feel like there is, no way forward for mana motuhake to exist at the same time as the kāwanatanga, which I just find really, frankly, quite delusional. I don't think that I don't think that it's rocket science, and I don't even think it's particularly controversial that people who have lived in this part of the world for thousands of years would like to look after our own affairs, that we believe we have the knowledge to be able to make decisions that make sense for our people and make sense for the lands that we live on and the moana that we live near and live through. So it's almost like there's this real there's this real block that's going on for people such as Ruth Richardson and Hobson's Pledge, Don Brash, that all the like, to be able to envision a future where we can actually coexist in a way where it's not a zero-sum game where one group has all the power of the other and the other just has to suffer, that we can actually live together. And that's kind of depressing to me.
Yeah, exactly. It's it's like, trying to make it out like I suffered, so you've got to suffer back. But should you have suffered in the first place?
Yeah, sure. And also, how has Ruth Richardson directly suffered from the Waitangi Tribunal existing? How has she, I just would like some examples, point to the instances. I would be surprised if Ruth Richardson is a woman struggling to get by. I could be wrong. I don't know her personally. I don't know what her bank account looks like. But, you know, with a lot of these people, it's like, please point to the example where Māori having mana motuhake, or even just an inch of mana motuhake that has been not promised to us. Please tell us how exactly that impacts your life in a way that is meaningful and tangible. Or is this really overblown in your minds to be this kind of oppression that does not exist? It is not real. It is an imagined oppression.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to our Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok, News Guide, the Order Paper Podcast. YouTube, Twitch, Instagram.